August 7, 1942. The Pacific air hangs heavy over Guadalcanal. The sea is black, silent, and restless. Before dawn, dark silhouettes rise from the water. Boots hit coral sand. Rifles come up. Breathing slows. The first wave of U.S. Marines does not shout. They do not run. They move forward with practiced silence, men trained to fight, land, and survive. In the jungle, Japanese sentries freeze. They have never seen war like this. Leaves tremble. Insects fall quiet. A distant rumble of naval guns rolls across the island. This is not Europe's war. This is something different. Closer. Hotter. More personal. Here the rules are survival, endurance, and relentless pressure. For the Imperial Japanese Army, trained to fight with honor and sacrifice, these men from across the ocean feel unfamiliar. Unstoppable. Over the coming months, a reputation will form. A reputation built in mud, blood, and heat. A reputation that spreads through the Japanese ranks in whispers. And with it, fear. The fear of the U.S. Marines. December 7, 1941. The morning sky over Pearl Harbor burns. In a matter of hours, the Pacific is no longer a quiet frontier. It becomes a battlefield. Battleships list in flaming water. Aircraft lie twisted across runways. Smoke rises in thick, black pillars visible for miles. For Japan, this is a calculated gamble. Their empire has grown fast. Manchuria, China, Southeast Asia. Oil, rubber, iron, resources needed for a modern war machine, but America stands in the way. Its navy, its industry, its reach. The attack on Pearl Harbor changes everything. The United States is no longer a sleeping giant. It is a nation mobilizing for total war. Within weeks, war planning maps are spread across long tables in Washington. Red pins mark islands most Americans have never heard of: Guadalcanal, Tarawa, Saipan, Iwo Jima, tiny dots in a vast ocean, yet strategically priceless. Japan's strategy is defensive and layered. Island chains are transformed into fortresses, airstrips carved from jungle, bunkers buried into coral, caves blasted deep into volcanic rock, machine gun nests concealed behind vegetation so thick that daylight barely penetrates. These islands are not just positions. They are traps. The Imperial Japanese Army believes in attrition through willpower. Every island must bleed the enemy. Every beach must become a killing ground. Every American soldier must pay in blood. Japanese soldiers are raised in a culture of obedience and sacrifice. Surrender is shame. Capture is dishonor. Training emphasizes endurance, bayonet fighting, spiritual strength. Many soldiers believe death in battle is preferable to life in defeat. And yet, something unexpected happens. The first American units sent to face them are not standard infantry. They are Marines. The United States Marine Corps is still small compared to the Army, but it is specialized. Amphibious warfare, rapid landings, shore-to-shore combat, jungle conditioning. These men are drilled again and again to land on hostile beaches and keep moving. While the U.S. Army trains for continental warfare, the Marines train for chaos. This difference matters. The first major clash comes at Wake Island, then at Guadalcanal, then at Tulagi, and slowly the Japanese defenders begin to notice something unsettling. The Marines do not break. They advance under fire. They keep pushing when wounded. They dig in, adapt, flank, and attack again. The Japanese High Command expected hesitation. They expected fear. They expected retreat. Instead, they find momentum. The Pacific War becomes a brutal test of terrain, endurance, and psychological strength. Jungle heat rots boots, rain soaks weapons, malaria, dysentery, jungle rot, enemies without uniforms. And yet, the Marines keep coming. This realization spreads up the Japanese chain of command, not through speeches, but through casualty reports, radio silence, overrun positions, units that simply stop responding. The Imperial Army begins to understand. These Americans fight differently. And this is only the beginning, as earlier clashes give way to organized, large-scale island fighting that will expose a widening psychological gap between the two forces. By early 1942, Japan controls a vast defensive arc across the Pacific. From the Philippines to the Solomon Islands, their generals believe they have created an impregnable perimeter. The logic is simple. Let the Americans come. Let them dash themselves against fortified beaches, against jungle positions, against soldiers who do not surrender. Tokyo's war doctrine rests on a dangerous confidence. They believe in spiritual superiority, that willpower and honor will defeat industrial power. They believe the American people are soft, unwilling to endure heavy casualties. Hollywood soldiers, factory armies, not warriors. Japanese intelligence officers write reports describing Americans as physically large but emotionally fragile, excellent with machines, weak in spirit. This underestimation becomes a fatal miscalculation. The U.S. Marine Corps that arrives in the Pacific is not built on fragility. Most Marines are volunteers. Many are hardened by the Great Depression. Farm boys, dock workers, steel mill hands, men used to physical work and hardship long before they ever wore a uniform. Their training is ruthless. Recruits run until they collapse, crawl through mud, learn to shoot under pressure, reload blind, change magazines in darkness. They learn small unit aggression, fire and movement, leapfrogging attacks, covering fire, instinctive response. This makes them unpredictable on the battlefield. Japanese defensive doctrine relies on fixed positions, pillboxes, trenches, spider holes, and tunnel systems. These are meant to trap the enemy in kill zones. But the Marines do not behave like planned-for enemies. They go around strongpoints, they crawl through grass, they throw grenades into firing slits, they use flamethrowers when needed, they move at night, they improvise. On Guadalcanal, Japanese soldiers discover something terrifying. The Marines do not just hold ground, they hunt. Small patrols move silently through jungle. They track sounds, footprints, disturbed foliage. They leak through defensive lines like water. A Japanese soldier, trained for honor-bound frontal engagements, now faces an enemy that appears and vanishes inside the jungle. Reports sent to Imperial Command begin to change in tone. Less confidence. More warnings. American Marines are described as stubborn, unnaturally aggressive, and dangerous at close range. This fear does not come from propaganda, it comes from experience. Bayonet clashes in jungle clearing, grenades in dark tunnels, Marines charging through artillery blasts instead of waiting. At night, when the jungle is at its darkest, Marines dig in shallow foxholes and wait. And when the Japanese launch their famous banzai charges, screaming. Sprinting, massed attacks meant to break the enemy's spirit, they hit walls of disciplined, controlled machine gun fire. The psychological effect is devastating. The Japanese expected fear. They expected hesitation. Instead, they encounter calm. Machine guns do not panic. Riflemen do not scatter. Officers stay standing. The more brutal the environment becomes, the more the Marines seem to thrive in it. And slowly, something cultural shifts inside the Japanese ranks. Instead of viewing Americans as weak, rumor spreads. The Marines are relentless. They are tireless. They are different. Not because they feel no fear, but because they fight through it. This growing reputation does not remain abstract. It hardens with every blood-soaked beach and every jungle ambush, as human, tactical, and psychological angles begin to define the true reason fear begins to take root. In the Pacific, fear is never theoretical. It is physical. Sweat in the eyes. Mud on trembling hands. The sound of insects so loud it feels like drowning. Japanese soldiers are trained to die well. US Marines are trained to survive. That difference shapes everything. Marine units live for weeks in wet clothes, eat cold rations, sleep in foxholes crawling with insects. They learn to function without comfort, without relief, without pause. When fear comes, and it always does, it is absorbed, controlled, redirected. A Japanese infantryman, raised on the idea of decisive, honorable death, expects an enemy who will break under such conditions. Retreat, panic, beg. Instead, he encounters men who whisper instructions in the dark, who keep their hands steady, who rise calmly from cover and advance into fire. This breaks expectations, and expectations are the foundation of courage. Fear grows not because the enemy is invincible, but because he behaves unpredictably. Japanese doctrine is built on coordinated defense and massed counterattack. Marines do not fight this way. They break into small teams. Fire teams. Automatic riflemen. Riflemen. Grenadiers. Each man knows how to move, cover, reload, and advance independently. This gives the Marines flexibility the Japanese did not prepare for. Rather than attacking head-on, Marines crawl around flanks. They use folds in the land, fallen trees, drainage ditches, craters. They move through what Japanese planners considered impassable jungle. Machine gun nests, designed to dominate one direction, suddenly face attacks from behind. The effect is disorienting. A Japanese defender feels surrounded even when he is not. Feels hunted even when he still has ammunition. This constant pressure erodes morale long before positions fall. Fear feeds on chaos. But Marines bring structure into chaos. Squad leaders shout clear, direct commands. Platoon-level signals are simple. Hand gestures replace shouted orders. Even under bombardment, Marines continue to move in shape, in rhythm. To the Japanese eye, this feels unnatural. Explosions do not stop them. Casualties do not freeze them. They step over fallen comrades, not with indifference, but with discipline. This discipline looks like emotional absence to the enemy. And emotional absence is terrifying. The Pacific War is fought at arm's length. 10 meters. 5 meters. Sometimes closer. Japanese soldiers excel in bayonet fighting, but Marines do not panic in close quarters. They use shotgun blasts inside bunkers. Grenades before entry. Flash and movement. The Japanese are used to enemies freezing at the moment of impact. Marines keep coming. That relentless closing of distance, step after step under fire, becomes a psychological weapon, not spoken, not announced, but felt. Some Japanese survivors later described the same sensation. It was like fighting men who would not stop moving forward. Fear does not explode all at once. It accumulates. It builds in the chest, in the hands, in sleep. And as these perspectives deepen, technology, leadership style, and moral contrasts will further explain why reputation became reality on the battlefield. In the Pacific, advanced machines mean nothing if they cannot survive mud and jungle. The Marines rely on weapons built to endure. The M1 Garand rifle fires reliably in rain. The Browning automatic rifle provides mobile suppression. The Thompson submachine gun dominates close jungle distances. But one weapon changes psychological balance completely. The flamethrower. To Japanese defenders inside dark bunkers and tunnel systems, fire is terror. Flame does not respect walls, sandbags, or caves. It consumes oxygen. It fills enclosed space with heat and fear. Marines use flamethrowers methodically, not wildly. Clear, burn, advance. To the Japanese soldier underground, the terror is total. It creates a new fear, not of death alone, but of suffocating, burning darkness. Japanese forces are rigidly hierarchical. Orders come from above, disobedience is dishonor, initiative is rare. Marine leadership works differently. Sergeants and lieutenants make decisions in seconds. They do not wait. They react. This makes them look chaotic, but this chaos is organized. If an officer falls, the next Marine steps forward. If a squad is pinned, a private might crawl through fire to throw a grenade. There is no pause. No confusion. Japanese forces expect collapse when leaders fall. Instead, they see replacement after replacement. This continuity breaks psychological models of warfare that the Japanese army relied upon. Japanese after-action reports begin to change tone by late 1942 and 1943. The language shifts. Where earlier reports described Americans as disorganized or unfit, newer documents call Marine units unyielding, hard to dislodge, and dangerous in night fighting. Some Japanese officers quietly warn their troops. Do not expect collapse. Do not expect surrender. Expect counterattack. This change is invisible to propaganda, but real inside field command. Soldiers feel it. Fear is not always shouted. Sometimes it is carried in lowered voices and careful glances. The Japanese soldier is taught to die for the emperor. The Marine is taught to bring his men home alive. These two worldviews collide violently. For Japanese units, survival is secondary to honor. For Marines, survival is the victory condition. This makes Marines persistent. They do not sacrifice blindly. They withdraw when needed. They advance when advantage is real. To the Japanese, this feels like fighting an enemy that never exhausts itself emotionally. The Marines are not racing toward death. They are engineering survival through violence. That makes them harder to predict and harder to defeat. By the end of this phase of fighting, fear is no longer rumor. It has reached the level of strategic awareness, and the stage is set for the decisive moments where this psychological imbalance would erupt fully. Those moments would come in fire, sand, and volcanic ash, where reputation would be tested and turned into legend. November 20, 1943. Tarawa Atoll, a thin strip of coral in the Central Pacific. The Japanese know this island perfectly. They have measured it, mapped it, fortified it. Concrete bunkers are hidden behind sea walls. Machine gun ports cover every approach. Artillery is buried into reinforced positions. The lagoon is shallow, too shallow for landing craft at low tide. The Japanese believe this matters. And it does. As marine landing craft grind forward, the water becomes waist-deep, then chest-deep. Marines climb over the sides and begin wadding hundreds of meters toward shore. Under fire, bullets cut the water. Mortars burst above heads. Men stumble. Men fall. And the rest keep moving. The beach becomes a slaughter zone. Bodies pile, packs drag men underwater. Blood colors the surf. Japanese defenders expect the assault to collapse. It does not. Marine after marine steps forward. Rifle raised. Grenade in hand. They do not stop. They do not run back. They reach the seawall. They climb it. They throw grenades into the gun ports. At Tarawa, the myth breaks. The myth that Americans will halt under heavy defensive fire. The myth that overwhelming casualties will end an assault. By nightfall, Marines are inside the Japanese defensive core. The defenders encounter something they did not plan for. Marines fighting at extremely close range. Shotguns clearing trenches. Flamethrowers clearing bunkers. Rifle butts and bayonets used without hesitation. Tarawa lasts only 76 hours. But in that time, the psychological impact is permanent. The Japanese defenders are nearly destroyed to the last man. This does not inspire fear because of brutality. It inspires fear because of inevitability. The Marines do not retreat when logic suggests they should. They advance. And then comes Saipan. June 15, 1944. A much larger island. Higher stakes. Deeper terrain. Japanese troops here include elite units, fanatical, disciplined, and fully prepared to die. The battle stretches across weeks. Caves. Ridges. Ambush zones. The Japanese execute banzai charges, thousands of men in final mass assaults. The Marines do not break. Machine guns remain steady. Artillery fires by prearranged signals. Riflemen reload smoothly under pressure. The attack waves are cut down. The fear comes not from defeat, but from realization. Even in their most extreme cultural expression of courage, they cannot terrify the Marines. Then comes Peleliu. September 1944. The heat is beyond tolerance. The ground is coral rock. No soil. No cover. The Japanese change their tactics. No more beach defense. Now they wait inside. A honeycomb of tunnels. Firing ports invisible from the outside. A new idea bleed them from inside the island. And once again, it fails. Marines adapt. They seal tunnel entrances. Pump fire inside. Collapse cave systems. The defenders listen to the sounds of Marines calmly working from outside. Not screaming. Not shouting. Working. It feels methodical. Mechanical. And soon, the Japanese defense system, once a symbol of discipline, becomes a tomb. These battles are not just victories. They become stories carried by survivors. Whispers passed between units. Do not underestimate the Marines. Because bigger tests are still ahead, on black volcanic sand where the fear would become undeniable. February 19, 1945. Iwo Jima. A small volcanic island halfway between the Marianas and Japan. To the Japanese, it is sacred ground. To the Americans, it is a stepping stone. Beneath the sand lies a city of war. Lieutenant General Tadamichi Kuribayashi has built a defensive system unlike anything before. There are no obvious beach defenses, no banzai charges, no wasted lives. Instead, there are tunnels, more than 18 kilometers of them, firing positions that can appear, vanish, reappear from behind. Artillery hidden under rock. The Marines land. The beach seems quiet. Too quiet. Then the earth opens. Machine guns erupt from the sand. Artillery blasts rise from unseen positions. Mortars fall with surgical precision. The sand itself becomes an enemy. Volcanic ash pulls boots down. Burning metal flies overhead. And still, the Marines move forward. 1 meter. 2 meters. Another ridge. The Japanese defenders are watching something they have not planned for. The Marines do not panic. They do not freeze. They do not rush blindly. They adjust. They bring up tanks with flamethrowers mounted on them. They mark firing positions. They work through geometry of angles and arcs. Kuribayashi's strategy begins to fail not because it is weak, but because the Marines do not behave like human beings under terror. That is what many Japanese survivors later describe. The fear reaches a new level. This is not about winning or losing. It is about facing men who seem immune to psychological collapse. Then comes Okinawa. April 1, 1945. The largest amphibious assault in the Pacific. This is no longer just island warfare. It is prelude to invasion of Japan itself. More than 100,000 Japanese troops, civilian population trapped in between. The terrain is hills, ridges, and limestone formations. Rain turns everything into mud. The Japanese dig in, and the Marines, alongside army divisions, push forward through weeks of artillery storms, ambushes, and subterranean warfare. Night attacks, snipers, booby traps, hidden mortars. The Japanese fight until they physically cannot. And yet the Marines still advance. The fear now is no longer rumor. Japanese soldiers understand. If the invasion of the home islands comes, these men will be the ones landing. That realization spreads through intelligence channels, through survivor accounts, through officers who have seen it themselves. One Japanese staff officer writes that American assault troops fight with cold persistence, not excitement, not emotion. That description becomes the core of fear. Not rage, not madness, control. By the end of Okinawa, Japan has lost strategic depth, defensive doctrine is broken, psychological advantage is gone. The Marines are no longer seen as just soldiers. They are seen as a force of inevitability. And when the fighting ends, the consequences of this fear do not disappear. They remain in memory, doctrine, and in the final understanding of what modern war has become. Those consequences unfold slowly, in silence, long after the guns go quiet. The guns fall silent, smoke lingers over shattered beaches. The Pacific sun rises over islands that are barely recognizable as land, coral shattered, jungles flattened, bunkers reduced to rubble. The cost is staggering. At Tarawa, out of roughly 4,800 Japanese defenders, only about 17 survived. Nearly 1,000 Marines lay dead, over 2,000 wounded. Each number tells a story of courage, of terror, and of a new kind of warfare. Guadalcanal had already demonstrated this reality months earlier. Prolonged engagements, disease, supply shortages, and relentless assaults exhausted Japanese units. Casualties mounted, and morale cracked under the weight of an enemy who refused to retreat. On Saipan, nearly 30,000 Japanese defenders faced a similar fate. Thousands chose banzai charges in futile attempts to reclaim honor, yet they were cut down by disciplined fire, by relentless advance, by a fighting style they had never faced. The psychological toll was evident in surviving reports. The Marines were described as unending, stubborn beyond reason, and immune to fear. The culmination at Iwo Jima and Okinawa left no room for doubt. The numbers are brutal, nearly 21,000 Japanese soldiers killed on Iwo Jima, with only a handful captured. Okinawa saw over 100,000 Japanese military casualties and tens of thousands of civilian deaths, contrasted with around 12,500 U.S. Marine and Army fatalities. Beyond these numbers lies a subtler consequence, a psychological shift in the Japanese military. Commanders no longer assumed the Americans would falter. Letters and field reports reveal a growing, quiet dread. Even elite troops, trained to endure, began to anticipate the relentlessness of the Marine Corps with unease. Fear had entered their doctrine. The Marines, for their part, learned lessons that shaped amphibious warfare forever. They refined landing techniques, small unit coordination, and jungle combat strategies. Each island assault hardened tactics, discipline, and morale, creating a feedback loop where experience reinforced effectiveness. The terror the Japanese felt was not born of myth or propaganda. It was born of reality, human, tactical, and technological superiority applied consistently under extreme conditions. Each battle reinforced that fear, turning it into a strategic advantage that reverberated across the Pacific campaign. The stage was now set for the final reckoning, as Japan's defensive perimeter collapsed and the inevitability of American advance became impossible to ignore. By mid-1945, the psychological impact of the Marines' campaigns had reached every corner of the Japanese command. Reports from surviving units often emphasized not just losses, but the relentlessness of the Americans. These were men who did not tire, who adapted continuously, who attacked in ways that broke the expectations of traditional Japanese defensive doctrine. The reputation of the U.S. Marines had become a strategic tool. Japanese officers began to anticipate a level of aggression and efficiency previously unseen. Even where positions were theoretically strong, commanders hesitated to commit units fully, fearing annihilation. This hesitation, subtle but pervasive, affected operational planning across the Pacific. The human element of fear cannot be measured in numbers alone. In letters smuggled from frontline units, Japanese soldiers expressed awe and terror simultaneously. One field report from Peleliu noted the stubborn advance of the enemy despite impossible conditions, while another described Marines as engineers of death, calm in fire, untiring in assault. These accounts reveal that fear had become as potent as bullets or artillery, an invisible barrier that weakened morale before the first shot was fired. On the Allied side, this reputation further strengthened cohesion and confidence. Marines understood that their reputation preceded them, yet they continued to fight with discipline, not arrogance. Fear became a self-reinforcing factor, turning psychological dominance into tactical advantage. Leaders could exploit it to plan smaller assaults that achieved disproportionate effects. Strategically, the Pacific War shifted irrevocably. Islands previously considered defensible became untenable against an opponent that combined industrial might with relentless training, adaptive tactics, and psychological resilience. The lessons learned during these campaigns informed post-war military doctrine globally, emphasizing small unit autonomy, rapid adaptation, and the integration of psychological pressure into battlefield planning. By the time the Japanese home islands were threatened, the Marines' legacy of fear was complete. The Imperial Army knew that American troops would not falter. That knowledge alone influenced defensive strategy, civilian mobilization, and ultimately contributed to the decisions surrounding surrender. Fear had become both a weapon and a signal, a testament to the Marines' relentless effectiveness across the Pacific theater. The human, tactical, and technological edges of the U.S. Marines had converged to create something far greater than battlefield success, a psychological inevitability. From the shores of Guadalcanal to the volcanic ridges of Iwo Jima, the legacy of fear they instilled shaped the final chapters of the war in the Pacific. The war in the Pacific was not only a struggle of firepower and strategy, but of human endurance, will, and perception. Across countless islands, under tropical suns and volcanic skis, a singular truth emerged. Fear could be as decisive as bullets. The U.S. Marines, through discipline, adaptability, and relentless training, became the embodiment of that truth. They were ordinary men forged into extraordinary soldiers, farm boys, laborers, and factory workers, transformed by rigorous training into units capable of facing unimaginable conditions without hesitation. Their strength was not in invincibility, but in persistence. Each step forward under fire, each bunker cleared, each patrol through the jungle reinforced a psychological reality for the Japanese. Retreat or surrender were not options. These Americans would not break. History often measures victories in territory taken, battles won, or casualties inflicted. Yet in the Pacific, another measure emerged: reputation shaped by action, fear cultivated by endurance, and inevitability imposed by resolve. the Marines demonstrated that psychological dominance, calm under chaos, calculated aggression, and moral clarity could tip the scales before bullets even struck. This legacy reverberates beyond the war itself. It transformed amphibious warfare, inspired modern military doctrine, and altered the way nations perceive the balance between human courage and industrial might. It reminds us that warfare is not only fought with weapons, but with the mind, spirit, and relentless determination of those willing to face danger and continue forward when others falter. For the Japanese defenders, the Marines were more than an enemy. They were a force that redefined the limits of fear, endurance, and human tenacity. And for history, the story of these relentless fighters serves as a lesson in the enduring power of preparation, discipline, and the unyielding human will. In the end, the Pacific War did not simply test armies, it tested humanity. And in that trial, the U.S. Marines left an indelible mark, a reputation forged in mud, fire, and sweat, remembered not just for victories, but for the fear they inspired and the unwavering courage that earned it.